St. Lucians. We're now entering the third segment of our program, and we're right back here. When we left off, we were discussing the kind of water, should I say, the kind of water that is available to us and how we need to deal with it. My guest, Mr. Hippolyte, was just identifying a body of water in the Union area which has some sort of prospects, and he will give us his take on that a bit more, Vince.
Yes. Well, in fact, we began showing a lot of interest in that body of water ahead of the drought this year. When we started planning for the drought, we realized that we really had to be ahead of the drought if we were to manage it very well and do not affect the economy of St. Lucia, because in our minds all the time is the economy of St. Lucia.
Naturally.
We cannot destroy the economy. Correct. And then
yes.
believe that we can resuscitate it.
Yeah, because the economy is to pay the bills.
Precisely. So Wasco is always saying we must make sure that the economy does not suffer,
yeah.
and then the question how. And so we begin to plan. So we started planning, and we identified this body of water, and we started showing an interest. But Wasco is a company, and the body that's responsible and owns water in St. Lucia is the WRMA, the Water Resource Management Agency.
So that's a separate company?
Well, it's a separate body.
A separate body?
Yes, it's a regulatory body.
I understand.
So they own all the water in St. Lucia.
Okay.
So if you were to abstract water from the sea or water from anywhere, you have to get permission from them. You have to get a license.
Fantastic.
Because we have a license. Wasco has a license.
I didn't really know that.
Oh, yes, that's the structure now. So Wasco has no authority.
Okay.
Because Wasco is just a company.
Now, who is there? That company has a board of directors?
Well, it's within the Ministry of Sustainable Development.
Okay,
yes,
fine.
so it has, it's a unit, it's a department,
yeah.
and,
okay,
it's an agency in there.
Okay, and they have the final say.
Yes, and they exist by legislation, so they have legislation that supports them.
I never heard of it, but besides being existent, has it been effective? Have they been really doing what they say? Have they been doing what they should do over the years?
Well, yes. In fact, we have to deal with them all the time.
Okay.
In Wasco, they give us a
directive.
Yes. They own the resource.
Okay.
So they can exercise the law, for example, the legislation.
Okay.
Now that you are in a water-related emergency, they are the ones with the power.
Okay.
Not Wasco.
Okay.
So the power does not reside with Wasco, it resides with that body.
Got you.
So that body is the body that can do things. So to come back and answer your question about the source of water.
Yes.
Well, that source of water is there. And we started showing interest in it, and we wrote the WRMA. And what we have done is to take samples of that water to determine what the water
is like.
Yes, it's like. And what would be required to treat that water.
Okay.
So we were thinking of probably a two-stage approach. One approach is to say, if we have a really serious crisis and the drought is prolonged and it deepens,
yes,
can we then very quickly treat that body of water
Got you.
and put it onto our system and send it precisely?
To the
so that was
consumer.
one thing.
Yes.
And then the interest going forward and say, well, if the water is brackish, if the recharge rate is good, even if it's desal and so on, can it not be a body of water as a reservoir in itself where you can have a desal facility go in and so on and so on. So that was in the, it was at the back of our minds in some kind of little distant area. And so far what we have done is take the samples, and the samples are being examined now. So when it comes back, we'll have a fairly good idea.
How soon you think you'll be hearing something?
Well, we should be hearing something pretty soon, maybe before the end of July.
That's fantastic.
Because we are sampling and testing the water, not just in Trinidad, because there's a body in Trinidad that can do that, as well as in the United States.
It's so
Professor
funny
Morgan
you say that, because I have been watching that body of water for the last 15 years, because when Sue Williams was doing their excavation for stone, the deeper they went, the more water they got out.
Yes,
and I actually brought it to the attention of the ministry. And if my memory serves me right, I remember talking to Mr. Calix George, who is the Minister for Communications, and I alerted him about that water, and he did indicate to me then that that area, the Union area, was a fairly well prolific area for water. And I did go to Wasco at the time. I can't remember exactly who I spoke to, and but it wasn't followed at that time. But I suppose maybe at the time they felt the dam was there, they didn't need it. But as you rightly said, you have to preempt those situations, because what you're telling me today should have been known by everybody, because I've heard it. I lived away for quite a bit of time, especially in the banana period, when they were cutting down a lot of the matured trees to plant the banana trees, which I was told the banana tree does not have much roots. So therefore, we had a lot of soil erosion.
That's correct.
And we could watch it, because when it rains heavily, you just have to go outside and you see the amount of water coming down. And the environmentalists did speak about it, because it was also affecting the reefs and covering them. Yeah?
That's right.
Yeah. So, and I mean, you just have to watch the Shock River, not the Shock River, well, the Shock River, and also the Cul-de-sac River, to see the amount of brown stuff coming down. And you know, all that's our topsoil going away, you know.
Correct.
And of course, you and I were the SLASPA. You were not in a top position at the time, but I think, were you in the accounting section at one point?
No, I was the economist at the
Economist,
time.
okay,
Yes.
fine. And I remember when I was put on the board, the SLASPA board, on my very first meeting, just to familiarize myself with what was going on, I took a walk around the docks, and I was shocked that although St. Lucia had been winning all kind of awards, to see the state of the docks at the time. And I distinctly recall mentioning to the directors that SLASPA should actually purchase a cherry picker, $100,000 or so, put it at the mouth of the Castis River and dig a hole 14 feet deep every Monday morning and retrieve the topsoil, and we could actually sell it to us. But then that in itself should have been an eye-opener of the amount of topsoil we were losing. And now what you're telling me today rings a bell, and I see the problems we're having. But some time ago when I was talking to you, you mentioned that the consultant which you have here now had given you some indication that the deeper you go down, you find more, you get more information of what is happening to our water. Can you highlight a bit more?
Well, yes, and that is on the groundwater side. The Ministry of Sustainable Development has been for a while now working with Professor Dale Morgan out of MIT in the US.
Dale Morgan.
Dale Morgan,
yeah.
Out of MIT in the US. And he has been a regular visitor here.
Yes.
And he has done a lot
He has
of
a
work.
very good reputation.
Very good reputation.
He's a graduate of MIT.
Well, he's a professor there, actually.
A professor
yes,
at
he's a
MIT.
professor
So
at
that
MIT.
must be a man who knows what
Oh,
he's doing.
yes, and he is a West Indian. I think he's a Trinidadian. So
is he on island now, gents?
No, he's not on island. He has gone back, but he frequents. He comes back.
I would love to
and
have
back and
an
forth.
interview with him
He's a
at some
quite,
point.
he's a very strong guy.
Yeah.
And what he has been trying to do for St. Lucia is to identify where we have groundwater. Now, there is a particular test, as I understand it,
Yes.
because I'm learning, you know, I'm reading.
Naturally,
I'm
we
learning,
all
yes.
are.
What they call it a resistivity test. So it's like prospecting. It's almost like looking for oil.
Okay.
And he has identified a few areas in St. Lucia where the results are very strong.
Okay.
And he says the strongest area that he has identified is the Vanna area.
Okay.
So he says that the indications in Vanna are very strong, but these are indications for now.
Right.
But he's also indicating that the indications are strong and shows that it's about maybe 200 meters deep. So 200 meters deep would be about a little over 600 feet.
Yeah.
Now the thing about it is you have to do a lot more work
Yes.
to give yourself greater assurances before you actually drill.
Because that's an expensive
Precisely.
process. Yeah,
You
correct.
spend millions of dollars drilling
And
only
get
to
nothing.
find out right, you don't get enough.
Right.
And we don't have that kind of money
Naturally.
to do. And more so, what's important, and I think that's the point you're trying to get me to make, is the fact that you have to be sure that if you identify a body of water beneath ground, that it is not just that is the most important thing. The most important thing is how quickly that body replenishes itself.
Got you.
So they call that the recharge rate.
Right.
So recharging that body of water is significant. If you were to abstract water from that body,
And there's enough more feedback.
precisely,
Yeah.
and it will take you 10 years to fill it back,
Then you're wasting your time.
you're wasting your time.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
But you know, Vince, as you mentioned about Mr. Dale Morgan, an MIT professor, this man has to be well recognized in the US.
Yes.
He must also have relatively good connections.
Yes.
You know, something is just going through my mind now. We also have in St. Lucia Buckeye, who just bought over the Hess project.
Yeah.
This is a very powerful organization. And I think Buckeye originated from Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Dale Morgan Wasco, and Buckeye sort of get together and revisit the possibilities of working together and drilling. Because as we said earlier in the program, St. Lucia cannot afford that kind of money. And time is not on our side. Time is not on our side. This is a very serious situation, and I don't know whether that is a good idea. I'm trying to short circuit because, you know, going away and looking for money is a very difficult situation. Right now, for instance, you know, recently the Prime Minister was in London, as you very well know. He had a big conference, he had a big function, he's gone back again. I have been in that position before because I was a goodwill ambassador to St. Lucia in the early stages, and you know, there's no need blowing our trumpet. What we need to look at is what we have done for the country. And as the Prime Minister rightly pointed out, it is not easy to get an investor. When I was there and I was at the NDC, many St. Lucians may not be aware of that, but Club Med had been limping along for 3 years by the organization just paying 50% of the salaries. So there was no economic activity. And eventually, when the Prime Minister, Dr. Anthony, and myself went to the Florida and found out that nothing was happening, we took them to task, and they confirmed that they were not going to reopen. At that point, the Prime Minister asked me to do whatever is possible. And I remember flying to Montego Bay and meeting the owners of Coconut Bay, who have a number of hotels, who know how to run a good 3-star hotel. And I'll tell you something, Vince, it was not easy. I virtually had to go on bended knees to the people, to the Hendrickson family, and with the help of Mr. Butch Stewart, got them to come to St. Lucia and do the Coconut Bay project, okay? Also, we got Mr. Butch Stewart to bring in and start an airline called the EC Express here. And, you know, it was not easy. It lasted for 7 months. You know, and many people on the island at the time, unfortunately, the people who were running their own airlines, they pulverized the company, okay? And, you know, eventually, EC Express had to leave because of the losses that they were chalking up. But you know, it was sad because they were already renting 15 homes. We had them down at the port, and you know, we tried to build what you call a hangar. We got opposition. So you know, we have to understand that getting people, investors in, is one thing. Holding their hand and making them so is another. So we need to do that. And I really think now that we have talked, you have taught me so much at this meeting today, that it is a situation we need to revisit as quickly as possible. I hope that the various powers that be are listening. This is a sort of a, should I say, an indication of where we should be going by talking to people on the spot. You see, going away is one thing, but when you have a company at Buckeye and St. Lucia, they're familiar with what's going on, you know, and they have the means from Texas to bring people down to do those things. So I could only hope that Mr. Hope, is that right?
No, Morgan.
Mr. Morgan,
Professor
sorry.
Morgan,
Mr. Morgan can do something to help us. Yeah. This is the end of our third segment, and we'll be right back.